Morning. We are on Daf Base Amid Base 72b, and we saw.
Good morning. It's good to have it working. Sorry.
Yes. Good morning, Charles and Donna. Two of you.
Good morning.
Jules. Good morning, everyone. Steve just got on. Good morning. Yesterday we saw a machlokas between Abai and Rava. Everybody agrees that misasek, somebody who was absolutely was not actually trying to do the prohibited action, but rather was trying to do something else, and mistakenly the prohibition happened, that they would be exempt of a sin offering, of a chatas. The case the Gemara gave was somebody who was trying to pick up something that they thought was detached from the ground, and it ended up detaching it from the ground and therefore harvesting. They didn't mean to cut it all from the stem, and therefore they didn't mean to do this action. Whereas, if somebody actually meant to cut a product, a fruit, a vegetable from the stem, but they didn't realize the stem was still attached to the ground, does that also count as not having intended for the prohibited action, or which what Rava says, and therefore you're exempt of a chatas? Or are you still intending to do the action of cutting a fruit or a vegetable from its stem, from its the branch that's giving it nutrients, but you thought that it had already been cut off from the ground and therefore would not be harvesting, but it ended up that you took something that was attached to the ground and therefore it was harvesting. Abai says that counts as the action you wanted. You wanted to take the tomato off of the vine. You wanted to take the apple off of the branch. It's just that you didn't realize that the other end of the vine or the other end of the branch was still attached to the ground. So Rava brought a proof text to his idea from a brisa, and now the Gemara is going to analyze that brisa. Amar Mar. So we had said in this statement, if somebody in Shabbos is different than other prohibitions, other mitzvahs, in that in Shabbos, if you did two prohibitions in one ha'alama, in one lack of knowledge, a lapse in remembering the prohibition, so you're going to only bring one chatas offering. Chayiv or kalachas vachas. There, by Shabbos, you bring one for each of the prohibitions you did. Whereas masha enke b'sham mitzvahs. Whereas in other prohibitions, you only bring one. So Gemara analyzes, where is that case? That in Shabbos, you're going to bring two chatas offerings, sin offerings, for two transgressions. Whereas in other mitzvahs, you're only going to bring one. So we had seen. If he did two separate actions, two prohibitions, such as he harvested and he ground up what he harvested, so then it's two separate actions. Of course, he would have to bring two chatas offerings. And by other mitzvahs, similarly, if he ate forbidden fats and blood, both of which are prohibitions, of course he would bring a chatas for each one of them. It's true that by Shabbos he would have to bring two sin offerings, two chatases, but the same would be true for other prohibitions. Ela shar mitzvahs the loy mechayev. Where is it that by other mitzvahs that you are not obligated in bringing a second sin offering for two transgressions in one ha'alama, in one lapse of knowledge or prohibition? So where is that? That he ate fats, forbidden fats, and in the same lapse, he ate another forbidden fats. So the equivalent for Shabbos would be that he had one lapse of remembering that harvesting is prohibited, And in that same lapse, he harvested once and twice. So, of course, he would only bring one sin offering because it's all one lapse. So then they're equal in that way as well. Gemara says no. There is a case here where he did harvesting and then he ground up what he harvested. And therefore, of course, two separate acts. And as two separate acts, it would be chayiv, two separate sin offerings. He's going to be obligated in bringing a sin offering for harvesting and a sin offering for grinding. So what do we mean that there are other mitzvahs, that it's not the same? That's talking about idolatry, which is the equivalent to all other mitzvahs, and therefore it calls it other mitzvahs. Idolatry. Avodah Zarah, Rabbi Ami, like Rabbi Ami said. Amar Rabbi Ami said, Ziveach v'kiter v'nisech b'hala ma'achas and v'chai v'lachas. Rabbi Ami taught that if somebody did multiple transgressions in one one service to the idols. He came in, he slaughtered an animal for the idol, he burnt it up, he poured some libations on the altar that he had made for this idol, all in one forgetfulness, not realizing that it was prohibited. There he only brings one sin offering. Mamaya came to Avodah Zarah. So he says, okay, so we're talking about idolatry. Shabbos, if you did two separate things, such as harvesting and grinding, in one lapse of remembering that it was Shabbos. Now, if you didn't remember it was Shabbos, you only bring one. You remembered it was Shabbos, but you didn't remember these were prohibitions of Shabbos. So you harvested, you harvested, and you ground. So each one is going to be a separate sin offering. Then you the equivalent for that would be idolatry. You slaughtered an animal and you also burnt it up. So two separate actions, and you didn't realize that they were prohibited. Yet you're going to bring one sin offering. So that's the equivalent, and it shows the strength of Shabbos that you're going to bring two sin offerings versus Avodah Zarah you're going to bring one. Let's see the end of the brisa, which says the reverse. The strength of other mitzvahs is this: other mitzvahs where you were mistaken without intent, you're going to be obligated. Where Shabbos, if you had no intent, you're going to be exempt, which was the proof text to Rava. Well, great, but what's that case by idolatry? If you're saying this Bryce is making a comparison and distinction between Shabbos and Avodah Zarah, where is the case in Avodah Zarah and idolatry that you're going to be obligated even without intent, and Shabbos is going to be exempt?
This is all going into Mandama that we're talking about Davar she'eino miskaven. Is that right? If you did a Davar she'eino miskaven on Shabbos.
No.
So what is
talking about misasik? Misasik. Misasik means where you were trying to do a different action. Davar she'eino miskaven is where you were doing something that you didn't intend. Something happened that you didn't intend. Here, the difference is that you did an action, and you actually meant to do the action you were doing, but you didn't intend to do it in a prohibited way.
Could you give an example?
Yes, I meant to take the stem off of this tomato, and I didn't realize the other end of the stem was still attached to the ground. So I meant to take it off. I just didn't realize it was a prohibited form of action. So I'll give you the
So he would have to be. Wouldn't have to be
the range of prohibitions. A simple shogeg.
He wouldn't have to bring a chatas for that.
That's what Rava says. No chatas. Abai says yes. Rava says no. So the range is like this: I intend to take this tomato off of the vine. I know the vine is attached to the ground, and I know that I'm harvesting this tomato. I simply forgot that harvesting is prohibited on Shabbos. Everybody agrees chatas offering. The next level down is I have harvested several tomatoes, and they have stems on them still, and I want to pull the stem off of the tomato. And in one of them, I pull the stem off, not realizing it actually was a tomato still on the vine. And by doing so, I detach it. So I meant to detach the stem from the tomato. I simply didn't realize it was in the prohibited form, where meaning it was still attached to the ground. There, Abaya says you bring us an offering. You meant to detach the tomato from the stem. You did, and you harvested. Rava says, no, you're exempt. You didn't mean to do the prohibited action. You meant to take a stem off a tomato that was already detached, and you didn't realize this one was still attached. Third case, I didn't mean to remove stems. I have a basket of tomatoes right near the plant, and so I meant to bring up the basket, not realizing that one of the tomatoes was still attached. And in moving the tomatoes, it detached. So I didn't mean to harvest. I didn't mean to take the tomato off the stem to begin with, but I did it. The fourth case of Davar She'eino Miskaven is I'm not trying to do an action. I'm trying to pull a table, and as I pull the table, a furrow is being made. So I had no intention of doing anything to the ground at all. Here, I'm intending to do something. So this is the uniqueness of the Machlokas Abai v'Rava is where I intend to do the action, but not in a prohibited form. I intended to do the action of pulling the stem and the tomato apart, but I didn't realize that this one was still attached to the ground.
So Davar She'eino Miskaven is, so to speak, a lesser level than Misasik.
Different. Rabbi Yehuda says, "V'davar she'eino miskaven," something you didn't intend. Rabbi Yehuda says you're still obligated, and Rabbi Shimon says you're exempt. We'll follow Rabbi Shimon. This is a slightly different action. Right? Where you're misasik, you're in the middle of doing something with this, but didn't intend this action. So what case is there a mistake without intent by idolatry that would be that we would be obligated and Shabbos is exempt? What's the case? Did he think that he's in a shul? He thought that this was a place that it's okay to pray, and he did all this stuff, and he bowed. His heart is to heaven. Why would he be obligated in a sin offering? He didn't serve the idols. And Rashi adds, even if he was in a place of worship of Avodah Zarah, which you're not allowed to go into, but he went into it and he bowed in service of Hashem, he would be exempt. Rather, he saw a statue of Caesar, which they were all over the place, and typically they would deify the Caesar at some point. So the Chazi Adarta v'Sagala, and he bowed to it. What's the case? Did he accept Caesar as the statue as an image of God? Mezidu. So that's not a shogeg. That's not inadvertent. He accepted as a god. That's an intentional idolatry. But if he didn't accept it as a god, so then what did he do? Lav klumuda. He didn't do anything. So he bowed to a statue of a national hero. So not a good thing to do, but he didn't transgress idolatry. He doesn't have to bring a sin offering. Ella me'ava mira. Rather, he did it, and the way Rashi interprets this is he did it for a friend, whether for another human, whether out of friendship to that human. And so he said, "Look, we're all here together at a party. My family is deifies whatever God, and we're all bowing. Come do it for me and just join along." And he had no intent of deifying or serving that god, but he went along because of a friend, which is prohibited. And he thought it's permissible because he's amongst friends, or out of yira, out of fear, even though that in certain cases, such a thing he'd have to give his life for, and not do it out of fear. But nevertheless, he did it out of fear. So in these cases, he thought he was allowed to do it and wasn't allowed to, and therefore he brings the sin offering. So Gemara says, well, that's great. According to Abaye, that says that that form of service of idolatry, where you didn't intend it for deification or service of a deity, but rather you did it for another human, whether out of a friendship or fear, that you'd have to bring a sin offering. But l'Rava, the potter, but Rava says that you're exempt. This would be a brisa that's a contradiction to him. So it can't be that it's talking about avodah zarah idolatry. Must be what we're talking about is that he thought it's permissible. He just thought that this kind of action is permissible. And for that you're going to tell me Shabbos is exempt. Well, that's every case of shogeg. I didn't know harvesting was prohibited. I thought it's permissible. That can't be, because Rava only asked Rav Nachman whether there's an exemption of multiple actions in one prohibition or not. Whether if he didn't know about Shabbos and didn't know that harvesting is prohibited on Shabbos, does he bring one sin offering or two sin offerings? But of course there's a sin offering on this. That's a shogeg. He just didn't know. It was prohibited. But to be totally exempt of a sin offering on account of that he thought it was permissible, that can't be. And now we're on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph 73. Ella Lav Reisha Ba'akum. So must be the beginning is talking about idolatry. And that's the comparison to Shabbos. It says that Shabbos, you did two actions, you're going to bring two sin offerings, but by idolatry, you bring one action. You have two actions, you're going to have one sin offering because you slaughtered and burnt it up to one idol. It's all counted as one lapse of avodah zarah. However, the reverse comparison, where we say that other mitzvos, if you were mistaken but didn't intend, you're going to be exempt. So you're going to be obligated. And by Shabbos, you're going to be exempt. So by other mitzvos, which other mitzvah are we talking about? There's a particular other mitzvah where even though you were a shogeg, you're unintentional, you misasek, you didn't intend for the action, and nevertheless you're going to have to bring a sin offering. The sefer b'shah mitzvahs v'shogeg b'le mischaven b'shah mitzvahs echidami. What is that case? The savar the shuman uvachlin. He intended shuman to eat permissible fats. And he ate it. So even though he didn't mean to eat this particular thing, he didn't mean to eat the prohibited fats, and nevertheless he's going to be obligated. This is particular to fats and arayas and illicit sexual relationships. And the reason is, the halacha is that in the case that we were talking about, for instance, misasek, you were busy trying to do something else and this happened. You were harvesting, you were picking up tomatoes, you didn't realize it attached to the ground, and you happened to harvest it by pulling it from the vine. There, you have no benefit per se, and therefore it doesn't count as your action. But when you eat or you have any other bodily pleasures as a result of your transgression, so you can't tell me that you're going to be exempt because you didn't do it, because you didn't mean it. But harei nehene, you did benefit from it. You're satiated. You ate. You had pleasure, and so the case of shuman, it's true. You intended to eat the permissible fats, and you ended up eating the prohibited fats. Yeah, but you ate. It counted as eating, and therefore it counts as something that you benefited from, and you have to bring the sin offering. Mashenka b'Shabbos, whereas in Shabbos, the potter, you'll be exempt. And the case would be the neschaven lachtech es hatolush. You intended to cut the tomato or from the vine is already detached from the ground. By mistake, you cut that which was attached to the ground. Potter is going to be exempt, and therefore that's a proof text to Rava that Rava had said that in this case you're exempt of a sin offering where you intended to detach a tomato from the vine, but you didn't realize the vine was still attached to the ground. According to Abaye, what's the case? What's this case? The Savar Reiku Ubale. It has to be, according to Rava, according to Abaye, the comparison to Shabbos has to be such that he didn't even intend to do the action. Because Abaye says if you intended to do the action of separating the tomato from the vine, you are going to be chayiv. So where is the comparison where in another prohibition you would be obligated in bringing the sin offering at that level where you didn't even intend to do the action? So he says the case is where you never intended to do an action that counts as eating. You were going to swallow something, but it didn't count as eating. Kesavar roiku. He thought that he saw something in a cup, thought it was saliva, spit, and he said, I'm going to swallow that. Let's not talk about his psychological state. But he decided he was going to eat this. Now, since it's disgusting, it doesn't count as eating. He may be swallowing. He may be doing the ingestion, but he's not actually eating. So he's not intending to do the action. Nevertheless, he's going to be chayiv if it turns out to be that it was the forbidden fats that were just warm and had dissolved and had liquefied. The reason is because he actually benefited. So the Sava Reiku Abole, and since he benefited, he's going to bring us in offering. Masha'enke b'Shabbos, whereas at Shabbos the Potter, that is Chava like B'Yas HaTolish v'Chatas HaMuhuba Potter. Because it's similar to Shabbos would be exempt because he didn't intend the action at all. He was trying to pick up a tomato. He didn't intend to separate it from vines in any case. He didn't realize it was attached to a vine to begin with. And it ended up that he harvested it. But if he was intending to cut, even though he was intending to cut something that was detached from the ground, and he ended up cutting something that was attached, Abaye says he would be chayiv. So that's the machlokas base. Rava says in Shabbos that if you didn't intend the prohibited action, you intended to do something, but not something that's prohibited, and you ended up doing something prohibited, you're exempt of a sin offering, meaning you have not transgressed on a Torah level, on a biblical level. And Abaye says, no, you have transgressed because you intended to do that action. It doesn't make a difference if you intended a prohibited or permitted action. The action you did is what you intended to do. The result was different, but the action was the same. And the only time you're going to be exempt is if you intended an action that was not actually the action you did. You intended to pick up a tomato, and you ended up detaching a tomato. That's different. And there he admits there would be no sin offering, no Torah prohibition. We take that to the next.
It's kind of like the difference between an accident and a mistake. If you just picked up the tomato but it was actually connected, that's an accident.
Sure. I'll take that. Itmar. It was said, we know that prohibition of carrying on Shabbos is either from a public domain to a private domain or vice versa. That's one, moving across a domain line. Or within the public domain, within a Reshus HaRabim, a public domain, you carry something 4 amos, let's say 6 feet. Okay, so you carry this 4 amos, you pick it up, you carry 4 amos, you put it down in a public domain, chayiv. This person is tossing something in a public domain and intends to toss it 2 amos, which would be less than the requisite amount, so it's still within its domain, within its original space of resting. It was resting here, and the 4 amos counts as still within its space, so he intends to move it 2 amos, and it ends up that he tossed it too hard, and it went 4 amos. So in Eschaven Lizrok Shtayim Azarak Arba, he intended to toss 2 amos and he tossed it 4 amos. So he didn't intend to transgress, but he intended to toss. So Rava Amar Pater, Rava says that's going to be exempt. I didn't intend to do the action that's prohibited. Even though I intended to do the tossing, but not the tossing of 4 amos. Abai Amachayv, Abai says, same as before. No, you are obligated in a sin offering because you tossed it, and that's the action you intended to do, and it went 4 amos. Rava says, I didn't intend to prohibit the tossing of 4 amos. Therefore, I'm exempt. Abai says he's going to be obligated because he intended to throw, and he threw it. And the fact that it went 4 is the measure of whether it was enough to obligate it. What happens if he thought that he was in a private domain? Within a private domain, since it has walls and it has its delineation, you can throw it as far as you want. So he's tossing, intending to toss 4 amos, but he thinks he's in a private domain. Turns out he's in a public domain. Rava says he's exempt. Abai says he's obligated. Rava says he's exempt because he never intended to throw it in a prohibited throwing of a public domain, the Isura, in a prohibition. Abai says he is obligated because he intended to toss. He tossed. So the action he did is the action he intended. It's just simply that he thought it was a permissible place, and it turned out not to be. That's a shogeg. He brings a sin offering. These are 3 cases of essentially the same basis of machlokas, the same basis of the disagreement. Rava says we look at not only the action but the action in its context. Would it be prohibited or not? And Rava says no. Did you intend? Abaye, says no. If you intended the action and the action you intended happened, so you're going to be obligated, even though you intended to do it in a permissible way and it ended up being prohibited. And I need all 3 of these statements from Rav and Abai. The Iyashmin and Kamaisa, because he had only said it in detaching the vine, the tomato from the vine. Because their Rav exempts him because he didn't intend to cut it from harvest it. Whereas when he tossed it 4 amos, his original intent happened. He tossed it 2 amos. It just went further as well. 2 is included within the 4. So he got as far as he wanted. So therefore, Rava says no, still, but I didn't intend to go for it to work out to be a prohibition. Perhaps he would have agreed to Abai. Therefore, we needed to say no, he doesn't. And even if he had said these 2, because he didn't intend to throw it that far. But in the last case, where he thought it was a private domain, so he intended to throw it exactly the way and where he threw it. He simply thought the scenario was something else. The Mechavel is Abai. Perhaps here too he agrees to Abai. Therefore, we need to say even here, even in this case, he disagrees. Tanan, we learned. We learned that the primary prohibitions of Shabbos are 39, 40 minus 1. And we said, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, what do we need the count for? We can count on our own. That if he did every single one of the prohibitions, knowing it was Shabbos, but forgetting that it was prohibited to do these actions, and he did every single one of them, he's going to have to bring 39 sin offerings. So we tell you the number of what he's going to have to bring. Now, so according to Abaye, this is an easy case. He intended to do something that was permissible, thinking it was a permissible case, and ended up being prohibited. So he has to bring a sin offering. So you have 39 sin offerings. The other these Surah Shabbos, he knew it was Shabbos, meaning he knew these are prohibited. And he knew that it was Shabbos. He knew that the prohibitions, but in measure he was wrong. He thought he was carrying 2 and ended up going 4. He thought that he was just going to detach 1 grain. He detached the whole stalk. whatever it's going to be. So therefore, each one, he was mistaken about how much he can do. So that's why he brings us an offering. Elo Rava Rava says that's an exempt case. So what's the case that he knows it's Shabbos, but forgot all of the prohibitions of Shabbos? So in what measure did he know Shabbos? And what's the case that he knew it was Shabbos, but he forgot all the prohibitions? So then in what manner did he know there was Shabbos? So we already saw this Gemara twice that said the same idea, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's going to work well, because Rabbi Yochanan was of the opinion that if you knew something is prohibited in Shabbos, but didn't know the severity of the prohibition, that it's kares, that somebody who transgresses, their soul is detached from Hashem and the nation. He knew it was a prohibition, he just didn't know that it was the severity of the prohibition, that it's kares. But if he follows the opinion of Shimon Lakish, that's it. He has to not know that it's a prohibition. So in what manner does he know it's Shabbos? So we saw this already twice. The Gemara says the other Shabbos Memai, the other he knew that there's a prohibition of traveling outside of your area, which we say is 2,000 amma. You can't go 2,000 amma. Let's say 3,000 feet outside of your area. We'll see what those are later, what counts as your area, but it's your city or where you've tented, you camped. That's going to be your domain, your space, Shabbos space, and you have a travel prohibition beyond that. And he knew of that prohibition. He forgot all the rest, and therefore he's going to bring us an offering for each one. So now we have this Mishnah that actually tells us the principal malachas of Shabbos. The prohibitions of Shabbos are 39, 40 minus 1, and we saw earlier in the Gemara that said 40. Why do we say 40? Because it says malacha, a creative act in the Torah 40 times, but one of them doesn't count, and there's a disagreement as to which one doesn't count. So we have 40 times in the Torah minus one that doesn't count. That's the 39 malachas. Hazoreah. So the first set is cooking. So in order to cook, you first have to have what to cook. In order to have what to cook, it has to have grown. In order to have grown, it has to have been planted and taken care of. So that's the sidra de pas, the order of bread. Now, Rashi points out that all of these were in the Mishkan, in building the Mishkan, as the Torah tells us that we saw earlier in Vayakel. The Torah says you shall build the temple, the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and don't do malacha on Shabbos, and don't do work on Shabbos. So we see that the prohibition of Shabbos are the things that you would have done in malacha, and you have to stop your action of building the Mishkan in order not to transgress Shabbos. So where did you have this cooking on in the Beis Hamikdash? The spices, the dyes that came from herbs or plants had to be cooked in order to extract the dyes. And that is this. All these things would have to have been done in order to get that. Sazareya, somebody who plants. V'achorish, somebody who plows. V'hakotzer. And by the way, the Gemara is going to ask us. It goes the other way around. You first plow and then you plant. So v'hakotzer, somebody who harvests, reaps. V'hama'amir, and somebody who makes bundles. V'hadash, somebody who threshes. So you'd have grains or other produce inside their husks or inside their stalks, and in order to get them out, you have to thresh them. They would typically do it by putting a board that has protrusions down over the grain and have somebody walk on it or an animal walk on it, and that would push them at different places, and the softer chaff would break apart, and the denser kernels of grain would come out. So that's dash, v'hazoreh, and then to separate the chaff from the grain, you would toss it up into the air and allow the wind to blow the lighter chaff, which was basically a straw, further away, and the denser, heavier grain would fall closer. And by doing that, you separated the chaff from the grains. That's zoreh, v'haborer, and then plucking out the remaining chaff. And and grinding, v'hamaraked, and then sifting after you've ground, sifting out all of the what you don't want in a sifter, v'halash, and then taking the ground wheat, barley, whatever you ground, and kneading it, adding water, a liquid into the dry, to make a solid substance. And then finally making it ofen, which would be in the cooking process would be mavashel. So these are the principal ones. The Gemara will ask us, wait, but winnowing, tossing it up as zora, tossing it up in the air and allowing the wind to separate the chaff, and plucking out the remaining chaff, and sifting is really all one action of separating the bad away from the good. The next order is in regards to making a garment. Hagozes esatzemer, somebody who shears wool off of an animal. Vamalabna, somebody who whitens it. Whether the whitening is like Rashi says that using nitrate in order to get the dirt off of the wool, or Rambam is some sort of oxidization to get it off. Vamanapta, niputz is also unclear. It's some sort of separating, whether it's combing, like Rashi and Meiri, or it's in flax, or sometimes even in wool. They would need to do it if it was too hard and clumped together. They would beat them down in order to break the fibers apart so that it can be spun well. And then once they had all of this wool or linen together, they would then dye it, and then they would spin it into thread. So you have many, many fibers, and they are essentially loose individual fibers, short, but you would then spin a lot of fibers together so that it becomes one continuous thread. So in order to understand the next, we have to understand the weaving process. I'm going to share a document now with you. A second. You see that? Do you all see this?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So Hamesach is the setting up of the vertical of the vertical lines. So the way weaving was, you had a fixed vertical line, which were spread apart as much as you needed and wanted. And then what you would do to weave is you had this shuttle that had the thread that was going to go horizontally back and forth, and you would have to lift the every odd number and then lift every even number. And as you went right to left, all the even numbers were up, and it would go under them and over the odd numbers. And then as you were going the opposite way, then the odd numbers were up and the even numbers were down. And this way, it would go under the odd numbers. And this way, you would go back and forth, and there would be those pedals, as you could see in letters L and M, which lifted the odd numbers or even numbers and vice versa. And they were done by having the harness and the heddle. The harness was basically a cross beam, and the heddles were these lines, either whether metal or thread that were hanging down from it, and they had a loop in the center, and that loop had the vertical lines running through it. One heddle had all the even numbers running through the loops, and one had all the odd numbers running through the loops. And as you would pedal, it would lift one of the harnesses, and with it, lifting all of the even numbers that were through the loops. And then you would lift the other side by pushing down its pedal, and that would and that would lift up all the odd numbers, or vice versa, right? I don't remember which one I was talking about. So you would lift the odd number threads or the even numbered threads, either way, by pushing on its pedal, and by doing that, it lifted up the harness, which pulled up the loops, which were called nirin. These loops, which had the threads going through it, and so it lifted up each time, and then you could throw the shuttle across, which would bring the horizontal thread through under the even numbered vertical lines, and then above the odd number, and that's the way they would be weaving. So the mesach is setting up of the vertical lines. The oseh shtei batei nirin, making two batei nirin, is where you make these loops for the vertical lines to go through. Obviously, if you only have a single loop, you've done nothing, because you cannot weave unless you have one up and one down. You need to have something, so you need a minimum of two in order for it to be doing anything. Or weaving two threads. Again, weaving one thread is not a weave, right? You need to have two threads, otherwise you're not doing it. Now, potsea is unclear as what that is. Rashi says potsea is if the horizontal lines are doubled in one area. It didn't line up neatly, that you would snip one at the edge and pull it out in order to make it smooth. So you throwing the shuttle back and forth and lifting in the even numbers and odd number, the vertical lines back and forth, right? And you're doing this quickly. And then when you try and push them together tight so that you have a nice a cloth and in the weave, and it turns out that one is thicker, one is misplaced. So you, at that point, it's going to be hard to straighten them out. So you snip it at the edge and you pull it out. According to Rashi, according to Rambam, it means some sort of where the actual spinning of the thread was thicker in one spot. So you cutting that off. It's unclear exactly what it is, but somehow it is breaking apart some of the thread, or in order to smooth, to make the weave smooth. So that's the question. Sure.
Is crocheting, which I believe is just one thread, not considered weaving?
No, of course it's weaving. You're weaving through a thread. That's two threads. You always have to be going through something in order to be threading.
But I think crocheting is just one thread, and you just make loops and pull it through itself, isn't it?
Correct. So those would be more knotting, which we'll see. It's a knot, and that's going to be the prohibition.
Okay.
It may not be a weave; it may be a knot.
Okay. Thanks.
Right. It may be that crocheting is knotting. I'd have to look into that. It's knotting and not crocheting, but not weaving. In any case, so we have potsea, shteichutin, somebody who essentially breaks apart the two threads. Kosher, somebody who ties. So you have to tie if a string, a thread tears, or one of these, or the edges that need to be knotted. V'hamatir, you untie. Now that we're up to potsea and matir, it's important to know that mekalkel, when you destroy in Shabbos, that's not a malacha, that you've not been creative, you've been destructive. That's not going to be a Torah prohibition. All the things of 39 malachas have to be creative. So when you're untying, how is it creative? It's creative because you're trying to fix it. So you're untying with the intent of tying it again in the proper way. Somebody who sews two threads. Akorea, somebody who tears, but he's tearing almanas litvar in order to sew it back together. So sometimes there's a hole in something, or something is coming apart, and in order to actually sew it together better, you need to tear some more. So then again, it's not destructive when you tear. And lit first take tefillos in order to sew two sewings, two threads, in order for it to count as actually sewing. Hatzad. The next order is somebody who is trapping. So hatzad tzvi, somebody who traps the deer. Hashochta, slaughters it. Hamafshita, who skins it. Hamocha, who takes the hides and salts the hides in order to make parchment. Ma'abedas ora, somebody who works lets the hides sit in solution, and he works it through so that it's going to be soft enough and easy to be parchment. Mamachka, Rashi says mamachka is he sands down or smooths it out by removing the hairs on the skin, on the hide. V'hamachatcha, somebody cuts it to size. Hakosef shtei osiyos, somebody who writes 2 letters on it, because communication would have to be with at least multiple letters to say write a word or a concept. V'hamochek al manas lichtav, and erasing. Again, that's destructive unless you're intending to erase in order to write it correctly, fix it, write the accurate number or the accurate letter. Lichtav osiyos, so erase in order to write 2 letters. Haboneh, somebody who builds, v'hasoser, and somebody who deconstructs. Again, deconstruction is only going to be considered non-destructive if you're deconstructing for the purpose of construction. Amachave, somebody extinguishes, and we saw again either to make coal so that it'll be easy to light next time. Ma'amave, and somebody who ignites a fire. Hamake bepatish, somebody who takes the last stroke of a hammer in order to smooth out or to break a rock off of its place, whatever it is, the last bang of the hammer that completes the object. And so Makav Patish really is completing the function that you have been working on. The last bit. Hamotzim Yeshus L'Shus, somebody who carries from one domain to another. Harei Elu Avos Malachas Arbaim Chasachas. These are the 39, the 40 minus 1 malachas, the creative acts that are prohibited on Shabbos. Tomorrow we continue with the Gemara, analyzing one by one.